Hello, welcome to week 5 of the spiritual exercises of Ignatius. I'm Carol Ann Weaver, I go by that now, and I am a spiritual director with Body and Soul Companion. I'm also trained in taking people through the spiritual exercises. This week the title is Creation Turns Away from God. So it's a little bit heavier week, and quite honestly, these contemplations this week look so intimidating. When I did it the first time, I almost just skipped this part. And actually, some people who will remain anonymous skip this part in their rewriting of the exercises. And I just think it's an important part to kind of wade through. So we'll wade through that. God, when I went through it, He made it very clear that I needed to be present and pray through this part. So don't be afraid. Weeks 1, 2, and 3 were definitely about, 4 too, about being wrapped in the bubble wrap of God's love, and God's love through creation, through wanting to draw you from disordered loves to love that is His love, that's so much more fulfilling. Freedom for praise, reverence, and service of Him, and being wrapped in His bubble wrap of His love. So keep that in mind as you meditate. We're going to maybe do some things that are interesting that maybe you've never done before. So just trust the process, and remember that there's always light at the end of a tunnel. So I invite you to close your eyes, to breathe slowly, and to recenter your scattered senses on the presence of God. Take all the time you need to do this, fixing your gaze on God, and know that His loving presence is here, and He's gazing upon you with such love, such care. Lord, we pray that more of our day would be directed to your service and praise. And we seek the grace to feel saddened to see creation turn away from you, knowing that you have always extended mercy. So this week, we apply our memory, our understanding, our will, and with some scripture throughout the week. Today is not as much scripture, and we do this to aid in the contemplations. And we remember that the contemplations are really about a search for interior understanding, a deep personal understanding of God, rather than just knowledge of God. Just a deep personal, I think of epignosis. I can never say it. It's a Greek word. And it's like the personal, deep understanding of God. So it's not knowledge about Him. It's personal. And it's about, with each daily conversation or contemplation, we have this conversation with Him as friend to friend. So know that He's with you. Know that He loves you, that you're wrapped in the bubble wrap of His love. So, closing your eyes, this is an invisible contemplation. Ignatius says, I see in my imagination my soul as a prisoner in this corruptible body, and to consider my whole composite being as an exile here on earth, cast out to live among brute beasts. I said my whole composite being, body and soul. That's Spiritual Exercises number 47. So imagine yourself in a desolate place, bound, helpless, and alienated. And Ignatius even suggests depriving yourself of light. If it's light outside, it's dark here. So he suggests closing the shutters to feel that feeling of darkness and separation because of rebellion. So I'm going to turn off that light, that candle that I lit, and I'm even going to turn off so you're not going to see me when we go through this. So I'm turning off the light. So I want you to imagine being cast away, an exile on earth, bound, helpless, and alienated. What is it like to be alienated from God? So in 2 Peter 2:4, Peter makes a comment that the angels rebelled against God. So this is a contemplation considering that rebellion. The first rejection of God's love in creation is found among God's special messengers, the angels. The sin of the angels exemplified the radical choice of self before God. I'll say that again. The radical choice of self before God, which is the essence of sin. And then the terrifying but necessary consequence of rejecting the very source of all life and love. God is the very source of all life and love. And the angels rejected that. The angels were presented with the choice which God continues to give us. And He gives it to us lovingly. The angels, and sometimes us, we freely choose to reject God's free offering of love and a sharing in divine life forever. So I'll repeat that. Sometimes we freely choose to reject God's free offering of love and a sharing in divine life forever. We reject that. So the angels close themselves off from God, and they were changed from a life of grace to a death hatred of God, and found themselves in their own choice of hell. There's a lot of history behind the fallen angels, but the main thing is to concentrate on your on you. What are your feelings to think about being cast off like that, bound, helpless, and alienated? Think about your feelings. So you're in that dark and desolate place. So my question for you is, this is a personal question. What are my times of rebellion where I have closed myself off from God and chose self over Him? How have I closed myself off from sharing in divine life? So I'm going to turn the lights back on. You can keep your eyes closed if you want. I need to do that to read from my journal eventually. But I want you to think about a time where you chose self over Him and closed yourself off from sharing in divine life. God, will you bring a memory to our minds where we chose that? Take your time. You might want to jot it down or journal that. And then, God, what do you want us to know from that memory where we chose to close ourselves off from divine life and sharing and chose self over you? So, and God, what is maybe a title for that memory? And turn the video off if that's not enough time. But it's so interesting. I did this whole recording and this memory flooded into my mind, but I hadn't pressed the button for the recording. So this is the second time I'm going through this. So just to be honest, when I was doing it just off the fly, thinking I was recording it, God brought this memory to mind. So that's why I wanted to see my journal. Because just this morning before this time of recording week 5, day 1, I was meditating with the Pray As You Go app in Haggai 1 through 8. Lovely app, by the way. Music, meditation, and I did Psalm 104 from Pray As You Go. I did the recording. I think it was week 2, I think. But anyway, in Haggai 1 through 8, it was about them building their houses when they came back from their exile back to the promised land. They were taking all their time building houses, their own houses, instead of rebuilding the temple. And Haggai prophesied that you have sown much and harvested little. And basically, they were clothing themselves, but they were not warm. And they were doing all this stuff to try to preserve self-preservation. and their priorities are wrong. And so one of the questions they ask, is there a time in your life where your priorities were wrong? And it's very similar where I shut myself off from divine life. I closed myself off and I chose self over him. And I wrote, yes, moving to Eugene and pursuing a career. I had gotten my graduate degree. Actually, it was 3 months away, and I ran away. God had sent me, and I said this in a previous, I think week 1 or 2, that God had told me, move to Corvallis, Oregon. There's going to be a group of women who are looking for you right now. And then one by one, the women came to me and said, God told me to talk to you. So they were just wanting to grow. And God said, you're going to help them grow. And then you're going to live with this married couple. And it turns out the married couple was totally friends with all these women. And they asked me, and they were more acquaintances and not really close friends, but they said, God told us we need to ask you to live with us. And I said, well, I'll say yes right away because he already told me. And by that, it had been like a year before he told me. And then the last was I had a vision. I'm kind of charismatic. I hope you don't mind. But I had a vision of a tall, dark, and handsome man. And I'm tall, 6'2", and my husband's 6'4.5". Well, that tall, dark, and handsome man. I had this vision, and I saw him. Long story short, I thought it was a different man. And so I ran away from Corvallis, Oregon, because that tall, dark, and handsome man was marrying somebody else. And I was devastated, but I was also just like confused and ran away. And I thought, well, I'm just going to pursue my career. So all that to say, it was a miserable time in that career, working 60-hour weeks and getting all sorts of health problems. I think sometimes, well, basically we cope. We have coping mechanisms that we employ when we don't want, that keep us from the presence of God. Our fear and anxiety and worry, and we cope. And so that's the way I coped, was by running away. So that's my example. But I want to say the good part of the story is that, again, with every desolation, consolation is right around the corner. I was really at a low, but God just brought me, long story short, I was supposed to actually do something else. I was supposed to speak at a retreat in Eugene, and I said yes. And then God said, tell him no, you're going to this conference and you're going to help your friend Tom with a workshop. And I'm like, felt really bad because I committed myself to being with this wonderful church group. And I can't remember what the subject I was talking on, but I just felt like I needed to obey God. And I came to that conference, and I should mention the day I moved from Corvallis to Eugene, the man that I was to marry walked in the door. He walked in the door, he was having dinner at our table, that married couple I lived with for 2.5 years, and I met him, but I was moving. And that man was my husband. And then I went to that conference, and he was in the back row of the first section. I was in the front row of the second section. And I said, oh, that's that guy I met. And that was March. This was November. I didn't last very long in that job. And a light was shining down on him the whole conference. And there's more to the story, but all that to say is I ended up marrying him. So with every desolation, consolation was right around the corner, and really he was the person I saw. The other person really wasn't very tall. He was shorter than me. But I think sometimes we get visions and we see things and we try to interpret them with our own interpretation. But he really was the person that I saw. So that's way too much information, probably more than you would want to know. Did I turn the light back on? I did. So, blah, blah, blah. But I thought it was great that I had no plans of sharing this story. And then I thought, oh my gosh, that's just what I meditated on this morning in Pray As You Go about, where I did. I really turned away from God. And so the thing about all that is there are times of desolation where we turn away from the light of God's presence. And He's always there shining. The light is always shining. And we just need to turn back. That's all. But we're talking about creation turning away from God. So we can just get a proper understanding of what Jesus did for us. So, and we are going to be looking at sin patterns in our life. Patterns, and I'll be sharing about those with me. Very transparent. So, I invite you to journal about that memory and those two questions that I asked. Write about that memory and then ask, what God told you, what the title is of that. And even asking God, what's the consolation from that dark place? If this caused you to be, in the dark place, like that, why I turned it back on, it didn't go back. Oh, there we go. It's motion sensor. Just talk to somebody, because this is a YouTube video, it's really face-to-face talking with somebody is really, there's even brain science that face-to-face talking, person to person, in person, is so valuable. And it's what God designed for us. So this is the next best thing for you, to have me talking. But if you are, especially if you're in that dark place, you're not alone. Find a spiritual director. Find someone who you can talk through these things with if you're continuing in that dark, desolate place. Because this week is about turning away from God. But I just want to end on a note of light. So take your light, go for a walk, have a two-way conversation, colloquy with God, review of prayer, and that is, I have a little bit of time, so I'm going to do the review of prayer. If not, I'll see you later. If you want to remember what the review of prayer is, I'm just going to do it because we have a little bit of time. I try to limit these to 30 minutes. So after your colloquy and your walk around, even around your room, that's good. I'm going to go do that because I've been sitting too long. So consider some of the following things to journal about. Journal the gist if you don't like to journal. What were the significant interior movements, feelings, reactions, intuitions, desires, emotions, thoughts, or insights? What was the prevailing mood of my prayer? Peace, agitation, excitement, boredom, confusion, calm. Dark. It might have been really dark for you to hear about the falling of the angels. And the reference for that was 2 Peter 1, or is it 2? 2 Peter. Oh, Carol. Sorry. So I just forgot to say what the reference was. 2 Peter 2:4. It's just one verse. It's not really a lot. It doesn't say a lot. So anyway, but it might be darkness. So process that. Was my prayer more about the head or the heart or both? Remember, it's about interiority. It's about experience in, your soul versus just, I learned that God cast the angels out of hell. That's an insight. That's a left brain insight, which is true. It's good, but the right brain, how do I feel about that? How did I feel putting myself in the position of an angel that's been cast out? of darkness, or into the darkness. What word, phrase, image, or memory meant most to me during prayer? Is there some unfinished business that I think God is calling me to return to in another time of prayer? Is there something happening in my life that is becoming part of my prayer? Do I feel moved to do something concrete in my life? And am I making the necessary preparations for my prayer? Is there anything I am doing or not doing that is getting in the way of my listening to God? So, go in grace and in the bubble wrap and the light of God's love. Be blessed.